Hello there. What is going on, everyone? We're going to talk about Star Wars Legion today. We're going to talk about the faction identities. Now, this is a big new thing that I don't know if everybody's really talking about, but this was a big keyword that came out of Adepticon and the big panel that Atomic Mass had when they were talking about their games. They were talking about Legion, and it was really first teased when they were talking about doing generic Jedi and basically adding them to one of the new units and talking about how that it was going to be a way for it's the ARF troopers that are getting like a Jedi detachment, and then how they were going to look at that was like one of the first steps in giving faction identity to all of the different factions, and they're going to talk more about that. In my interview with Will Schick, we talked a little bit about faction identity, and I wanted to kind of go over some of that because I feel like it's a pretty big deal. And with Mini Stravaganza just a couple of weeks away, I have a feeling that's one of the things that we're going to see a little bit more of. I don't know if they're going to go into it in too much depth, but it does seem like either a new edition or a big change or something like that is coming. Again, they said there's a lot to stay tuned for Legion, and it's not just new units. So that definitely kind of feels like a rules update, a points update, a new edition, some changes, something like that. And faction identity can definitely fit into that. I don't think that necessarily means that they're going to change all of the existing cards and stuff like that, but I do think that it means we're going to see some renewed focus on a few things. And it may impact also the future of the units, or maybe some additional command cards that are going to come out for those factions or something like that. I think that's actually a pretty easy way to give factions a little more identity, things that cater to their strengths, and kind of going from there. It's a good way to kind of start. But with all that being said, we're going to talk about all of the factions in Star Wars Legion and what we know, what Will Schick has said, and some things that we maybe can deduce or assume, even, if you will. There will be some parts that's speculation, but I'll try to separate the parts that we know from the parts that are at least my opinion. And I'll try to make that very clear. Also, there is still time left to enter to win that $25 Amazon gift card giveaway. I think I'll be doing that at the end of this week, so you have time left. You just have to be a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my videos. Let me know what your favorite faction is in Legion and what you're really hoping to get out of it in the future. So, because I think that kind of ties into this a little bit. So, start off with Empire. There were a couple of things said about the Empire. And, Will Schick talked a lot about that. Like, this game was always going to be a Stormtrooper game. It was always going to be about Stormtroopers. But I don't think that that was really where he was going for the faction identity, because he did talk a little bit about faction identity, and he mentioned vehicles and vehicular firepower for the Empire. And while that's not necessarily the first thing that I think of when I think of the Empire, that's definitely one of the things that do come to mind. The ATST was the first really big vehicle, and still one of the only really big vehicles in the game. It's one of the most beautiful models they've ever done for the game, and I think it's cool to kind of take advantage of that. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see more big vehicles coming out for the Empire. I did a video recently about like some of all of the different vehicles I want to see show up in Star Wars Legion, and there's definitely a lot that I'd like to see show up in the Empire. I don't really think they're going to do the AT-AT or the AT-AT, but they could. It's definitely on the edge of what is feasibly possible. It's on the very, very fringe edge, and that's only if they kind of scale back and maybe they do a sliding scale with it, or they make it like a terrain piece, or make it a scenario piece, or make it something that's only used for like Grand Army games or something like that. I just don't see it fitting into Legion as it is now. But if Legion were to change a little bit, then maybe there's a way to fit it in there. But there's lots of other vehicles that can definitely fit into the game, and I wonder if that means we'll see more battle forces for the Empire, or maybe more Imperial generic command cards that can favor vehicles a little bit more. I'm not exactly sure, but that is one of the things that Will Schick was saying. So something to keep your eye out for with the Empire in the future is that they may be favoring vehicles a little bit more. And I'm curious how that really will factor in with a lot of the new stuff that we've seen, because we haven't seen a new vehicle for the Empire in a while. We have seen a new heavy, but it was the Dark Troopers, and then we just got the Range Troopers, which are definitely not vehicles. So and the Inquisitors, which are also definitely not vehicles. Hopefully, we do get more Inquisitors, and even if vehicles are one of the planned focuses for the future of the Empire, it doesn't mean they're going to be all vehicles. That could just be one of their strengths. Let's move on to Rebels. Now, Rebels are going to have a little bit of speculation on, because Rebels weren't talked about in detail. But I feel like if I were to talk about not class balance, but rather faction identity and faction kind of where they are, I would say that Rebels have kind of two things that help them kind of stand out. And the first one is probably the biggest one for me, and that is cheap heroes. Rebels can get fairly high activation counts, and while still having multiple named characters, they have a lot of cheap heroes that are surprisingly good. They do rely on a little bit of luck, though, and that's the second part I would get to, is that Rebels tend to have a lot more white dice, or their white saves, white dice with defensive surge here and here and there, and so they're really counting on those white dice, and so you have a lot of characters that have like uncanny luck and things like that, and so they're trying to get the most like defensive rerolls and just trying to luck could be one of those things, or you might even call it hope, right, for the rebellion. So that's kind of like maybe the second thing. So I think that they're gonna, I think that would probably be what they may try to flex for and focus on. And that might mean also, by the way, that usually when we've gotten waves, it hasn't always been, but usually when we've gotten waves, and this was more in the FFG days, we would get a wave of content for the game, and it would be very close to being symmetric. So if you got a big vehicle, if you got a heavy for one faction, you get a heavy for the other faction. If you got special forces for one, you get special forces for the other. And that doesn't necessarily always have to be the case. AMG may still be developing stuff in waves, although I'm not sure their actual development schedule, but things don't always release in waves. You'll get like 1 or 2 expansions out at a time, as opposed to for where FFG we might have had like 4 or 6 for a proper wave, although like they started staggering Legion very early on. But going back to like the early days of X-Wing and Armada, it was usually like wave 10 comes out today, and it'd be everything that was all play tested and would be released all in the same day. And this game has really gotten away from that. So I feel like they can get away with releasing asymmetrical waves that might be like a heavy for the Empire, but an operative for the Rebellion. And wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised to see more cards for the Rebels that allow them to get more, unique special heroes. We did talk about one thing, is a lot of this Rebel stuff is kind of speculation based on what the Rebels where they already kind of fit. But we did also talk with Will Schick about the possibility of, like, since the Bad Batch has, all these unique named characters into one unit. We talked a lot about doing the Ghost Crew, and so it's a really great interview. I'll link it at the end of the video so you can go check it out. But there was a lot of great discussion on doing the Ghost Crew, and it leads me to believe that's definitely a possibility, and more units like that can get you more named characters on the board. And I think that's one of the things that the Rebels will have, like a lot of kind of disposable troops relying on luck, but also a lot of those heroic named characters that are pretty good, but not like crazy overpowered, but like usually in like the 100 point range, which allows you to take a lot more for a lot more activations, a lot more meaningful power activations. And I think that's a cool thing for the Rebels. Moving forward, one faction we did talk a little bit about was the Republic. Now, one of the faction identity focuses for the Republic is really to have elite units. And not to be confused with the Rebels' hero units, although they'll, because everybody's going to have their hero units. But the Republic's going to have expensive units, and that are trained extremely well. Clones are way better than stormtroopers, but also a lot more expensive, and that's ultimately why they were short-lived. But that's one of the things that makes the clones so great, and that's a great place for them to fit into the balance of this game. And that's kind of where they already are, but that's, I think, just something that AMG is going to embrace further. They may have an additional focus. I expect to also see more Jedi in the Republic. I wouldn't be surprised to see A lot more Jedi show up. I hope we continue to get more and more Jedi show up. And, of course, with the generic Jedi being a thing as well, I think that's also really exciting. So, I can't wait to learn more. We're going to be learning more this year as more preview articles come out, and probably a lot more at Mini Stravaganza, so stay tuned for that. Now, our fourth faction here is going to be the Separatists. Now, we didn't talk much about Separatists. We didn't talk a lot about them, but it's pretty. My guess is that Separatist faction identity is it's very well already established. AI pretty much is a Separatist exclusive, right? And it doesn't have to always be, but you find it in the Separatists all over the place. The B1 chain, and managing those activations and making that more of an important thing was a really big thing, and that was and that goes back to when the Clone Wars core set was first created. It kind of gave these factions their own identity. I feel like clones and droids, or rather Republican Separatists, had a pretty strong faction identity out of the box already, so I don't think you have to change the formula there very much. But when it comes to Rebels and Empire, they were a little bit more generic within each other, and a little bit more symmetric. And so I think when it comes to faction identity, you have to do a little bit more work on the Rebels and Empire, and a little bit less on the Separatists and the Republic. But there is another faction that we should talk about, and it's the Shadow Collective. What's their faction identity going to be? Are they going to get anything else? Are they going to get anything else? And that goes for other battle forces as well. Are we going to see any more Ewoks show up for Bright Tree Village? Are we going to see General Riken show up for Echo Base? Are we going to see more? Are we going to see those Viper droids for Blizzard Force? Are we going to see Ahsoka Tano? Which would be great for the Republic also, but also 501st and so on and so forth. The sky's really the limit, but unlike other battle forces, the Shadow Collective has a lot of stuff that's unique to only the Shadow Collective, and they were sort of marketed as the scum and villainy faction for Star Wars Legion. So basically that fifth faction, and so I feel like if any battle force is going to get new units that are added to that battle force, and I hope they all, or as many as possible, do. I think this needs to be number one on that list, and I think Book of Boba Fett gave us some great options that can go in here, and we're seeing new stuff from the underworld all the time. I think Kira, I think stuff from Solo, a Star Wars story, definitely fits into this. I think it's just the content's all there. Disney Plus has got it all. So if you're looking to pull from canon, which I imagine is what they kind of have to do, although it would be really cool if they could pull from Legends also, especially considering it's just a game. It's not meant to be a canon portrayal of events. Otherwise, certain characters would never be able to be killed on the battlefield. So, it's a game. Hopefully they can eventually be able to pull from Legends, but that's probably not going to happen. But even if not, there's plenty of stuff in canon that could fit into the Shadow Collective. And as far as their faction balance or their faction identity, who knows? Who knows? I mean, they kind of have what is it right now? The Pikes, just the Pike gun line is kind of the Shadow Collective's faction identity. I'd like to see them get a little more. I'd like to see them get those big Scorpionic walkers from Book of Boba Fett. I'd like to see, riding Rancors and all kinds of cool stuff like that. Although Rancors will work really well for plenty of other battle forces. And then Gungans, too. When are we going to see the Gungans come out, right? It has nothing to do with this video, but I had to throw it in there anyway. All right, guys, so that's just a quick little primer on what we know about faction identity and some things that we can assume for faction identity and what we don't know about what they're really going to do with faction identity. But I wanted to get the conversation started. I would love for you to be able to share your thoughts down in the comment section and also in our Discord. We have a great family-friendly gaming Discord. Love to have you guys join. If you do, be sure to click on the roles selection tab and choose whatever games you're interested in. It's going to open up all those for you. That is going to do it for today, guys. I want to thank you all so much for watching. Big thanks to my patrons. You guys are out of this world and help make this whole channel possible. I will talk to you later. May the Force be with you. Live long and prosper. Be excellent to each other. Party on, dudes, and always wash your socks.